Welcome back, everybody. You know that feeling being stuck, like you're just spinning your wheels, but you're not getting anywhere?
Oh, yeah.
Today, we're diving into Mel Robbins' The 5-Second Rule to see if it can help us break free.
Okay.
It's more than just a productivity hack, though. It's about rewiring our brains to overcome hesitation and really unlock our potential.
It's really fascinating how Mel Robbins even discovered this rule. She wasn't in a lab doing all this research or anything. She was actually at a very personal low point.
Mm.
She was feeling overwhelmed and unsure how to change her life.
It's so relatable, right? Like you
Right.
want to make a change, but you're kind of paralyzed by overthinking and fear.
Yeah.
I've definitely been there.
In Mel's case, the inspiration came from the most unlikely source, a rocket launch commercial.
What?
Yeah. The countdown sparked an idea. What if she used that same countdown to launch herself into action?
So instead of hitting snooze, she'd 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off out of bed.
Exactly.
It sounds so simple, almost silly,
Right.
but I'm guessing it worked.
It did. And what's really intriguing is that there's a neurological basis for why this works. It's not just about willpower. It's about actually understanding how our brains are wired.
Okay, let's get into the science then. How does counting down from 5 actually change our brain activity?
It all comes down to the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and breaking those old habits. When we hesitate or overthink, we get stuck in a loop. We're just letting fear and doubt take over.
So we're letting our emotions drive the bus instead of like our rational minds?
Exactly. The 5-second countdown acts as a circuit breaker. It interrupts that emotional loop, and it shifts control back to the prefrontal cortex. It allows us to take charge.
So it's like a mental jumpstart. We're essentially hacking our brains to overcome those automatic negative responses.
Precisely. By engaging that prefrontal cortex, we're creating a window of opportunity to choose action over hesitation. We're taking back the reins.
This is where it gets really interesting to me. Mel Robbins argues that this isn't just about productivity, it's about cultivating courage. How does that work?
Well, think about it this way. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite fear.
Mm,
Often what holds us back is the time we spend trapped in our heads, letting that fear build up.
that makes sense. If you overthink something, it becomes this huge, insurmountable obstacle.
Exactly. The 5-second rule helps us bypass that overthinking phase and move straight into action. It's like taking a running leap over the hurdle of fear before we have time to even psych ourselves out.
I love that analogy. So we're not necessarily becoming fearless, but we're learning to act before fear can paralyze us.
That's a great way to put it. Think about Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on the bus. It was a spontaneous act of courage. It wasn't a carefully planned strategy. It was about listening to that inner voice and acting on it in the moment.
That's a powerful example. But most of us aren't facing situations like that on a daily basis. What are some smaller, more everyday ways we can use this rule to just be more courageous?
It can be as simple as speaking up in a meeting when you have an idea, even if you're feeling nervous, or reaching out to someone you admire, even if you're afraid of rejection. It's about taking those small leaps that push us outside our comfort zones.
It's like we're training our courage muscles one small rep at a time. But what about the mental hurdles we face, like anxiety and worry? Can the 5-second rule help us manage those too?
Absolutely. One of the techniques Mel Robbins highlights is anchoring, which taps into the power of visualization to shift our focus away from negative thoughts.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that work in practice?
Let's take Mel's own fear of flying. Instead of getting caught in the spiral of what-ifs, she used the 5-second countdown to interrupt those anxious thoughts and immediately picture herself arriving at her destination, feeling calm and relaxed.
So it's not about ignoring the fear, but rather replacing it with a more positive image. Does that actually rewire our thinking over time?
It can. Our brains are incredibly adaptable. By consistently practicing this type of visualization, we're strengthening the neural pathways associated with those positive feelings, making them more accessible when anxiety strikes.
That's fascinating. It's like we're creating a mental shortcut to calmness. In the book, Mel also suggests asking yourself 2 key questions when worry creeps in. What am I grateful for? And what do I want to remember? Why are those questions so powerful?
Those questions act as a mental reset. When we're consumed by worry, our perspective narrows, and we lose sight of the bigger picture. By consciously focusing on gratitude and positive memories, we shift our attention away from the negative and remind ourselves of what truly matters.
It's like we're reminding ourselves that even amidst challenges, there's still beauty and goodness in our lives. It's a powerful reminder that we have a choice in how we perceive our experiences. Now let's tackle a topic many of us struggle with: confidence. It feels like this elusive quality that some people just have and others don't. How does Mel Robbins approach this? Mel makes a crucial point. Confidence isn't a prerequisite for action. It's a byproduct of action. We don't wait to feel confident before we do something. We build confidence by doing it.
So we're not waiting for the confidence fairy to sprinkle us with magic dust. We have to take ownership and create our own confidence.
Exactly. Remember the story of the engineer at Cisco who used the 5-second rule to introduce himself to 3 strangers? That one small act led him to track down the CEO of Cisco on a bike path just to make a connection.
That's amazing, and I bet he felt a surge of confidence after that. But what about those of us who get stuck in the procrastination cycle? It feels like the 5-second rule's biggest claim to fame is helping people overcome procrastination, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But what's interesting is that Mel distinguishes between 2 types of procrastination: destructive and productive.
Wait, hold on. Productive procrastination? You're telling me there's a good kind of procrastination? I have to hear more about this.
Especially when it comes to creative work, giving ourselves time to step away from a project can actually lead to better outcomes. It allows our subconscious minds to process information and make connections we might not have seen before.
So instead of forcing ourselves to sit at our desks staring at a blank page, sometimes it's better to go for a walk. Do something completely different and let the ideas simmer.
Exactly. It's about trusting the creative process. Even Mel herself admits that she took 7 months longer than expected to finish writing the 5-second rule. She attributes that productive procrastination to allowing the book to evolve and become more impactful.
I love that she's honest about her own process. It makes it feel so much more relatable. But what about the not-so-fun kind of procrastination, the kind that leaves us feeling stressed and overwhelmed? What are some strategies for dealing with that?
Mel emphasizes self-compassion. We've all been there, feeling guilty and beating ourselves up for procrastinating. But that only makes things worse. Instead, she suggests acknowledging the procrastination, forgiving ourselves, and then shifting our focus to the future.
So it's about recognizing that we're human. We all slip up sometimes. And the key is to get back on track. But how do we actually do that?
One powerful technique is to ask yourself, what would my future self do? It's about tapping into the wisdom and clarity of the person we want to become and letting that guide our present actions.
I love that. It's like we're getting advice from our wisest selves. So if I'm struggling to finish a project, I can imagine my future self who's already successfully completed it and ask, what steps did you take to get here?
Precisely. And the 5-second rule is the tool that bridges the gap between that future vision and present action. It helps us overcome the initial resistance and get started, even when we don't feel like it.
So it's not about magically eliminating procrastination, but rather having a strategy to push through it. That feels much more realistic and empowering.
Exactly. And one of the things I appreciate about Mel Robbins' approach is that she doesn't just talk about theory. She shares countless real-world examples of people using the 5-second rule to make significant changes in their lives.
Okay, let's hear some of those stories. Because it's one thing to understand the concept, but it's another to see how it plays out in real life. Who are some of the people who've used this rule to achieve remarkable things? I love a good transformation story. Who comes to mind?
One that really stands out is Charlie. He was over 380 pounds and determined to get healthy. He committed to using the 5-second rule every single day for over 500 days to help him make those necessary changes.
Wow, that's some serious dedication. 500 days. What did he actually do with the rule? Did he count down before every meal, every workout?
That's a great question. He actually used it in a variety of ways. It was his go-to tool for making healthier choices throughout the day, whether it was opting for a salad instead of fries, resisting that extra slice of cake, or getting himself to the gym even when he just felt tired.
So it was less about specific actions and more about cultivating a mindset of choosing healthy habits over and over again.
Exactly. The 5-second rule became his way of interrupting those automatic urges and giving himself the space to make a conscious decision aligned with his goals. And the results speak for themselves. He lost 176 pounds and completely transformed his life.
That is incredibly inspiring. It shows that consistency, even in small choices, can lead to incredible results. Okay, you mentioned countless stories. Who else used the 5-second rule to make a change?
Well, there's Alice. She was a young woman in the UK who was struggling with anxiety and agoraphobia, which made it very difficult for her to even leave her house. On top of that, she was feeling pressured to pursue a degree she wasn't passionate about.
That sounds like an incredibly tough situation to be in. feeling trapped both internally and externally. How did the 5-second rule help her?
It gave her the push to start making small changes. After watching Mel's TED Talk, she used the countdown to speak to her parents about her anxieties, gathered the courage to switch to a different university that better suited her interests, and even focus on her health, losing 28 pounds.
It's amazing how one simple tool can have such a ripple effect across different areas of life. It seems like it's about empowering yourself to take back control and make choices that align with your well-being.
It is. And what's even more encouraging is that Alice sees the 5-second rule as an ongoing support system. She wrote to Mel saying, "I've still got a long way to go, but whenever I feel myself slipping, I watch your talk again." It highlights the fact that change is a journey, not a destination, and having tools to navigate those ups and downs is crucial.
Absolutely. Now, we've talked about big life changes, but I'm curious about the smaller, everyday moments where we get stuck. You know, those seemingly insignificant decisions like hitting snooze or getting sucked into social media. Can the 5-second rule work for those too?
Absolutely. It's actually perfect for those situations.
Yeah.
Mel herself used to be a chronic snooze hitter. She realized it wasn't about needing more sleep, but rather a way to delay facing the day. She started using the 5-second rule to interrupt that habit. Instead of hitting snooze, she'd count down from 5 and immediately get out of bed.
Okay, I'm guilty of that one too. That feeling of wanting to burrow back into the covers is so strong sometimes. Did it actually work for her?
It did. Replacing the snooze button with the 5-second countdown became her new starting ritual. It created a sense of momentum that helped her overcome that initial resistance and start her day with intention.
I love that idea of a starting ritual.
Yeah.
It's like hacking your brain to create a positive association with waking up. What about other distractions like social media? We all know how easy it is to get sucked into that black hole of scrolling.
Mel shares a great story about her own daughter, Kendall, who realized she was spending way too much time on social media apps. She decided to take a radical approach.
Did she try to limit her screen time or set timers?
She went cold turkey. She deleted those apps from her phone altogether.
Wow, talk about commitment. But did she actually stick with it?
She did, and what's interesting is that by removing the temptation, she found she didn't even miss those apps. It freed up her time and mental energy for things she truly cared about.
That is so inspiring. It's a great example of how sometimes the most effective solutions are the simplest ones. It's not always about complicated strategies. It's about taking decisive action. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the 5-second rule, what's the biggest takeaway? What does Mel Robbins want us to remember?
I think it comes down to this. You have more power than you realize. You don't have to be a victim of your circumstances or your feelings. You have the ability to make choices, take action, and shape your own life. The 5-second rule is simply a tool to help you access that power.
It's like a reminder that we are the drivers of our own lives. We don't have to wait for permission or the perfect moment. We can choose to act, even when it's scary or uncomfortable.
Exactly. It's about taking ownership of your life one 5-second decision at a time.
Well said. So listeners, as we finish this deep dive, I'd like to leave you with this. What's one instinct you've been ignoring? What would happen if you gave yourself 5 seconds of courage to act on it? What change, big or small, are you ready to make? Remember, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.